Hi, everyone. This is Rico Figliolini, host of UrbanEBB, a podcast here just north of Atlanta in the smart city of Peachtree Corners, Georgia. So I appreciate you guys being with us. I have a great guest today. We have Chief Frank Trammer from Stockbridge, Georgia. Hey, Chief, how are you?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks for having me, Rico.
No, absolutely. Appreciate you being with us. Just to give you a little idea before I introduce our sponsors, Chief Trammer. His experience has been over 25 years in police, public safety. You've worked with a variety of different departments, right? Atlantic Police Department, Sandy Springs Police. You were assistant chief at Georgia Institute of Technology. Um, and you've been through, I mean, you have a rigor of diplomas and such in the public safety area, everywhere from the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command to Georgia Law Enforcement Command College, FBI National Academy. I mean, you get the experience, man.
Well, the best you'll ever looks on your resume.
True, true. So if anyone's going to stand up a police force, you'd be the guy. So with the experience. But before we dive into that, let me just say thank you to our sponsors, two great sponsors that have been supporting our podcast, the magazines we produce, and such. One of them is Vox Populi. So if you have a brand, and almost every business has a brand, right? If you want to be able to sell to the public, to another business, you need to establish that brand. And what these guys do is they bring that brand to life, whether it's a embroidered shirt or a vehicle wrap. They've done, I think, over 6,000 since they've started. And anything you can print a logo onto it, any object you can think of, just challenge them, let them know. Plus, they do variable data printing for postcards and all that. So you want your brand out there, whether it's trade show, local festival, they're the people to check out. So voxpopuli.com is the place to go. Ask for Andrew or Daniel, father son, the family business here in Peachtree Corners. The other sponsor is EV Remodeling Inc. Eli owns that company. Him and his family live here in Peachtree Corners. Great guys. They do design to build anything that you need, whether it's a kitchen, bath, back deck, or whole house remodel. They've done over 260 homes. Check them out. They've done great work, and we appreciate their support. So now back to the show. I say show, but it's a conversation, really. Um, yeah. So, this podcast has been talking to a variety of different people along the way when we started this. And so I get an opportunity to really find out and deep dive a little bit into some of the stuff going on. Um, Chief Trammer is from Stockbridge, Georgia, the city that I think up until about 2020 was about 29,000 population. That was about the time that you all decided almost to start, but you started the police force in 22. You went live in 22. In 23, the population was somewhere around 36,000 or so. Um, it's a tough thing to start something from scratch, almost anything, right? Um, Tell us a little bit, about how that happened. What was the motivation to reestablish a police force after over 40 years of not having one? Since what, 1973? Oh, actually, it was county police, right? I guess. I shouldn't say you didn't have any police force. It just wasn't a city police force.
Right. So Stockbridge is unlike I think a lot of communities that we've seen establish their own police departments, in that these cities that came about and started their own new police departments were new cities.
Mhm.
Stockbridge was not in this position. Stockbridge has been a city well over 100 years. Stockbridge, like many communities in the Metro Atlanta area, has seen substantial growth over the years. At one point in time, the city did have a police department, I believe somewhere from the 1940s, 1950s to about the 1970s, 1972, 73 was the point of time that it transitioned over to the county police department. But Stockbridge was a much different community at that point in time. Only several thousand residents as compared to 36,000 residents. And honestly, where we are right now with some of the recent annexations, I would say that in the next year we'll be approaching close to 40,000. So very similar in size and stature to the Peachtree Corners area and the initiative that they're launching, or at least considering to start their own police department. But the impetus behind that was that the elected officials in the city of Stockbridge decided that they wanted their own police department so that they could collaborate with law enforcement to develop a style of policing that was reflective of the desires of the community. We hear where I'm sure you have heard, your listeners have heard, and are probably familiar with the concept of community policing. It's not a new concept, but when we think about community policing, a lot of times people think that that's a division within a police department or that's the role of an individual within the police department. But really, community policing has been around for well over 100 years. As a matter of fact, the principles of modern day policing were established by Sir Robert Peel, who was the founder of the London Metropolitan Police Department back in the 1800s. And one of the basic tenets of community policing was the whole concept that the police are the public and the public are the police, that the police are only members of our community who are paid to give full-time attention to duties that are incumbent upon everybody in the community in the interest of welfare and community safety. Um, Not necessarily by design. Many agencies have not fully embraced community policing, and some agencies are more focused on a reactive style of policing. And again, that's not always intentional by design. Sometimes that could relate to staffing challenges that agencies may have that does not allow them the discretionary time to be able to engage in community policing. So the elected officials in the city of Stockbridge decided they truly wanted a community-oriented police department that was engaged in dialogue and relationship with the community to really accomplish that objective that I talked about just a moment ago, and that's co-producing community safety. And so this is something that they were considering for a number of years. I think that it started back in 2015. And so it took some time in order for that to fully materialize. So the dialogue happened in 2015, and we didn't fully launch until 2021. That's when the decision to vote on the police department and establish it was made. But the impetus behind that was truly a community-oriented organization that was really working in partnership with the community to address community concerns and enhance the quality of life.
Would that, every city's different, right? The makeup of a city, the demographics, just the energy of a city, right? Small, big. Well, did any of that have to do, did that philosophy come out of that, evolve out of the community the way it was?
Can you restate that question again?
Sure. So right now, I think the majority, like Gwinnett County is majority minority right now, right? Gwinnett Police is out there to some degree doing community policing as well. But like you said, with lack of officers, sometimes it can be difficult, right? It's like a business owner that does the work instead of going out and selling, that stuck doing the work maybe,
Right.
and you could be stuck doing that and not realize everything else going on around you. Um, Stockbridge is majority minority, I think, if I remember correctly. Does does that feed into the leadership wanting to get more community policing done in that way versus a different philosophy, like you stated?
I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with community composition per se. I think that it has to do with the general community expectations. Um, Stockbridge is a very diverse community. It is predominantly African American. I think it's 57 to 58%, well, maybe more than that. Maybe it's 60. I'd have to look at the numbers
Yeah.
specifically, but it's somewhere in that ballpark, high 50s, low 60s, African American, and then followed up by Caucasian and Hispanic and Asian American. So um, uh, it's a very diverse community. The style of policing in many respects, I think, is predicated not so much upon the racial demographics as much as it is probably the age demographics.
Okay.
When you have communities like let's say Midtown, where maybe you have many younger um, um, uh, individuals living.
Right.
They're living in apartment communities. They maybe don't have a vested stake in the actual community because they're in some respects a transient population, and so their whole concern is I just want crime to be low and my car not to get broken into. I really don't necessarily need to connect with the officers in the community.
Mhm.
Stockbridge is a very established community. much of it residential homes. Many of our community members are, a little older.
Right.
And so their desire is they want that. They want a department that they can connect with, that they can partner with, a department that's going to be responsive, not just to crime issues, but quality of life concerns that they have. And so I strongly believe and have seen as evidenced by the participation of our community that that's the type of policing that they wanted to see in Stockbridge, and nothing to any of the agencies that had served the city previously, because the Henry County Sheriff's Department, the Henry County Police Department, during that gap, had provided services to the Stockbridge community, and I think they did a wonderful job. I just think that the level of intentionality that the elected officials and the community members wanted, from an engagement standpoint,
Right.
was something they were hoping to see a little bit more of, and that was again the impetus for starting the Stockbridge Police Department.
Cool. And that makes sense to me, right? You want to be involved in the community. You're building out of the community also. Um, when you were looking to hire officers, it's tough for every police department. I think Gwinnett County is probably 200, has 200 openings essentially budgeted for. I mean, there's just not enough officers out there, not enough people wanting to work. And especially when you all started setting up, I think in 22 when you went live, that's probably even more difficult just because of the atmosphere at the time coming out of COVID at that point and stuff. Did you find it difficult to hire enough police officers? How did you go about doing that? How did you entice them to come to work in Stockbridge?
I think there is we didn't have any challenges, thankfully. We had 58 positions, full-time positions that we looked to staff, 4 part-time positions
Mhm.
when we began our police department. So 62 employees. We had over 1,200 applications for those 62 positions.
Wow.
A lot of it had to do with the vision, the culture, what we're trying to create here. And you
Mhm.
have to understand that there are a lot of folks that enjoy what they do. They enjoy policing. They want to be involved in the community. They want to help. And when people are leaving to go to different places, it's not always for better pay and benefits. It's a better work environment. And we're very intentional about creating the right type of environment. We first have a philosophy that we are employee focused. I believe that it's not the community members that come first, it's our staff, because I believe the way we treat our team members is the way that they'll respond in kind in terms of how they treat the community. And so we really wanted to create a culture that was focused on officer wellness, officer growth and development, and to really create an environment where our officers could thrive. And that in and of itself was an attracting factor for many people in joining the police department, is they wanted to be part of that environment, where they had strong supportive leadership and opportunities for growth and development, and a true concern holistically for the officers. So I think it's getting the culture, getting the environment right. And that was a big motivator. But to our advantage, we also had the support of the elected officials at the time in getting our salaries to be the most competitive in our area. We, because of our geographic location, are not going to be able to compete with the salaries of places like Sandy Springs and Brookhaven and some of the other communities, which obviously have a much larger tax base, and the communities are more affluent. But when we started our department, we did start off as the highest paid agency in Henry County. So that also was something that helped us to attract
Yeah.
the candidates into our department when we started up.
Did you do were there any other benefits outside of salary, which is, philosophy is great because especially at the time, I think there were a lot of anti-police sentiments and stuff. So who wouldn't want to work in a place that's welcoming, right? And also salary does make a difference, right? You got to be able to make a living, pay the bills, take care of your family and stuff. Were there other benefits, other initiatives that you all did to attract officers as well?
To your point, salary and benefits is always on the table. It's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to be able to provide that baseline level of security. We all have to eat and live indoors, and so we can't overlook that. as a motivator. Beyond the salaries, it wasn't anything that we necessarily did. The city of Stockbridge thankfully had a very attractive benefits package. So our officers pay very little in terms of their health insurance coverage. They have full health insurance benefits if you're a single officer and you have no dependents. Your health insurance is covered 100% by the city. As an example, if you have a family for full health coverage, you're looking at less than $180 a month. And that's a great benefit from a health insurance perspective. We offer a health uh, reimbursement plan for our officers up to $2,500. So any out-of-pocket medical expenses, the city will reimburse you up to $2,500. We have a 5-year pension that's paid 100% by the city with a 3% multiplier per year of service. So after 5 years of service, you have a guaranteed retirement benefit through the city. We had, of course, our take-home vehicle program. I think if you're going to start a department, everybody has take-home vehicles. To be competitive, you're going to have to do that. We extended our take-home range a little further than most agencies were allowing so that we could pull from some of the surrounding areas. But we didn't really have to rely on a lot of additional incentives and benefits and hiring bonuses and things like that that we've seen. Thankfully, we didn't have to resort to that. We had plenty of people that were willing and interested in being part of our organization based upon the benefits that we were offering at the time.
Were there any initial steps or challenges that you all, well, what were the initial steps? I mean, when you stepped in, where were you in the process? And what did you have to do? I mean,
Wow.
how did that work? I'm sure there were lots of challenges of sorts.
It's reverse engineering. It's beginning with the end in mind and figuring out and working backwards from there. The actual logistics of getting the department established and recognized was very simple and very straightforward. It didn't take a lot of time to do that. The next probably most time consuming aspect of the process was we had to truly have an understanding of what the overall cost was going to be. We had some projections, but we didn't have any hard figures. And so in that pre-planning stage, we had to understand, okay, well, with the salaries, with the
Right.
vehicles, with the equipment, what are we looking at? And we had to figure out and this is what I would encourage communities to do, is we had a very short time span to start a department.
Yeah,
From the time that
certainly.
was voted on October 21, I was onboarded, and the city wanted to go live with the police department July of 2022. So less than 9 months, we had 9 months
Wow.
during a global pandemic, supply chain shortages, staffing
Yeah.
shortages to stand up an entire police department over that span of time. And while there were funds allocated, they were estimations. And so we really had to take a look at things. And what we realized was that we were looking at a shortfall, a budget shortfall to be able to fully implement the size and scope of the department that we needed because there were some projections that were done. There's various different methods, but because of the way the county was had structured the city, is they really couldn't segment and let us know how many calls for service in Stockbridge proper are you looking at. So we had estimations. So until we began operating, we really didn't have a full understanding of what's the call for service demand within the community. So we had to take a look at what we need, come up with those projections for staffing, identify the cost associated with that and all the equipment. And then thankfully, there were challenges starting up in a pandemic, but thankfully we had ARPA funds that we were able to utilize through the American Rescue
Sure.
Act plan that we were able to use to offset some of those expenses, which really put us in a very good position to launch successfully, but also enabled us to do some things like completely renovate an old city building so that we have a full functioning police headquarters. Because that's another thing that you have to contend with is you have a police department, where are you going to put folks? There's obviously costs associated with configuring it so that you're able to conduct law enforcement operations out of it, and then sourcing the equipment, trying to figure out, with chip shortages and things along those lines, how are we going to get these vehicles? How are we going to get this equipment? So there were a lot of long days, long evenings,
Yeah.
weekends, cultivating relationships, just trying to figure out how we were going to put all these things into place. And then the next biggest part was the hiring. Doing thorough backgrounds, vetting processes for the 62 candidates. And to get to that 62, we probably had to interview 200 people and go through the process to um,
Did,
uh, really identify those that we wanted to select to be part of our startup.
did you all have an HR department at the time, or did you farm some of that out as far as the HR part of it?
Well, HR couldn't handle that. We only had one HR person for the entire city at that point in time, and so we absorbed a lot of that. We hired in phases. So
Mhm.
it started with hiring me as the chief, and then I hired four key command team members, of all which had different types of experiences, and they were given different segments of the startup. So, as an example, one individual had a lot of experience in background and hiring and policies and procedures and things along those lines. So their job was to own that piece of it. We had another that was very good with the whole finance logistics. So they handle a lot of the things with the budget and the procurement and sourcing equipment and things along those lines. And then somebody focused on, the training and development and things along those lines. So we had people tasked out, but we had to bring on folks as we started to get into, okay, we need to begin hiring people. So we had to hire additional people to be part of that de facto HR team to work through the background process and to help us get all of those folks onboarded in such a short period of time.
Did you guys end up leasing or buying cars? I know I'm getting
We
into
we looked at both options, and the lease option requires less capital from a city on the front end,
right.
and we were looking at that as a possibility until we learned that we were able to utilize the ARPA funds. And so we had the funding available to just be able to purchase the vehicles outright. Had we not had that, we likely would have looked at the leasing option
Mhm.
so that it wouldn't have had such a significant impact on the overall city budget.
Did you guys end up using the county's 911 system? How'd you end up working some of that aspect of it? I know some different cities do different things, right? You probably didn't do a helicopter or a SWAT team, maybe, but like Peachtree Corner's trying to figure out, do they do a canine unit, maybe, but be part of a larger multi-city drug um,
Task
enforcement
force,
group? Yeah,
right?
task force and stuff. So how'd you all figure that out? Like, where'd you go with that?
Well, the way that the county's configured, it's uh, not like many other surrounding counties. Henry County 911 was handling police fire dispatch for every city in Henry County. So part of the service delivery strategy was that they were providing that service. The only thing that was required of us is that when we started the police department, that all 911 fees get funded to the 911 center to be able to fund that portion. And so we work directly with Henry County 911. All of our dispatch calls go to the 911 center. We have a dedicated dispatcher that dispatches for Stockbridge only. And
Really?
that was an arrangement that was made with 911 as we began the process of building the police department.
I didn't even know that was an option. That sounds good. Um, so as far as other organizations, local organizations, what type of partnerships were you able to do or set up to work either with other police forces, or public safety organizations, or community organizations? How deeply are you involved in some of these?
At this juncture, nearly 3 years in, we've got just a multitude of partnerships, and that's enabled us to enhance our capacity, but also we don't want to be just givers or takers. We want to be givers also. And so when we talk about a partnership, it needs to be a true partnership. And so, as an example, if I'm asking the county to provide a service for the city,
Mhm.
what are we willing to do to lean forward to support them in their endeavors? And an example of that is that the county has a SWAT team that provides that service for the entire county. And in conversations with the police chief at the time, we were discussing how can we participate? How can we partner? And so what came out of that was a multi-jurisdictional effort where we actually have our officers that can go through the selection process. And from that, it's went from a county SWAT team to a multi-jurisdictional SWAT team So we're helping support the county by providing
Right.
staff to participate
Right.
in that
Right.
so that when we need that service, we're not asking for something without giving it in return. If an
Right.
agency's not in a position to do that based upon again, it's going to be based upon the number of deployments. So if you're a community that's very active, that has the high potential for situations like that,
Hmm.
there may be, the county might want some requirement that you provide a certain amount of funding to pay for that
Yeah.
if they're not
Sure.
open to some sort of multi-jurisdictional effort.
Right.
So those things are going to be conversations that have to be had with the respective parties to see
Mhm.
how you can move forward. Thankfully, we were embraced when the department started up. I was part of the startup of Sandy Springs Police Department back in 2006, and that was not as warmly received. And so we didn't run into a lot of issues, but we've got partnerships with the county police department, with the sheriff's office, um, even with neighboring counties. We have MOU with Clayton County Police Department. So if we need something like that, they're our primary go-to source if we have an explosive device. And so
Yeah.
we work directly with their bomb team. The sheriff's office provides helicopter support. We work with them as part of their narcotics task force. We work with the state patrol for handling serious injury and fatal crash accident investigations. So we've got a lot of various different partnerships with local, state, and federal agencies
I
across
think
the board.
that's great. I mean, your offices not only are participating, but like you said, there's a buy-in, your stakeholders in these things, but I think they get experience too, right? Being able to do it. If you all ever had to establish your own, I mean, you might have some background then at that point
And it's a
of
that
that.
that that also is an attractor because when you are a smaller agency, so to speak,
Yeah.
folks want opportunities. They want to see, okay, where can I grow? Where can I develop? And
Hmm.
there are people that have interest in being part of a tactical team. And if you don't have that as an option within your department because of the size and scope, is they
Yeah.
may look to go someplace else so that they can fulfill their career ambitions. But we try to
Right.
create all those opportunities internally to the best that we can so that we're still continuing to provide a development path for folks, and it's
Yeah.
a great retention tool as well.
Yeah, great point. I can see that. When there's no growth or movement, you stagnate, right? So
Right.
I don't think anyone wants to stagnate unless you're the type of guy that wants to be there 9 to 5 for the next 30 years and then retire. But yeah, I think most people want some growth. You mentioned Sandy Springs before, and that's curious too. So you were there during the time that they stood up their police force as well?
I was one of the inaugural officers there
Uh,
when Sandy Springs
What
started.
did you see any difference between what you all did in Stockbridge? Did you learn anything from Sandy Springs, let's say, from that, from when that was stood up? Anything that you utilized, any experience from that?
I think probably the biggest thing that I learned from that was the importance of getting the environment right and the culture and making sure that the people that you hired were on the same sheet, that we were clear on our purpose, vision, and mission, that we identified that before we got everybody on board so that everybody knows the same frame of reference that we're working from, who we are, what we believe in, what our philosophy is. Um, in Sandy Springs, a very similar situation, didn't have a lot of time to start up the agency. And that was the first time that a police department had been started up in a very long time. So in 2006, it was a relatively new endeavor. We saw obviously a lot of agencies come from that: Johns Creek, Brookhaven, Dunwoody, Milton,
Right.
South Fulton. A lot of cities have developed, but Sandy Springs really was the catalyst that uh, really cascaded a lot of these other cities and departments developing. So getting back to your original question, the emphasis was on experience, is that we want experienced officers. We want folks that have a lot of credentials. And I was joking with you, but I believe it to be true. The best that anybody's going to look on their resume.
Yeah.
Uh, just because you've got 20 years of service doesn't mean that you're going to be a great cop. It's what you've done in those 20 years of service. And
Mhm.
so I think that we probably should have took more time on the hiring process to really truly understand who is the individual, because I believe that when you hire for character and you hire for cultural fit, you can
Yeah.
train skill set. And so that's something we did a little bit differently because I wanted people at their core. If you want a community oriented police department, not to
Hmm.
say that folks don't, but I wanted folks that had or that most officers don't, but I really wanted people that at their core had a servant's heart and really was invested in this whole concept of community policing and working together with the community. And so the only thing that we really did differently was taking a look at our selection process and who we brought into the organization.
Right. Um, there's so many different ways of doing that, right? The quality of the candidates that you hire, ongoing professional development also, because you might hire a certain way, but you still need ongoing professional development, right? To reinforce the reasons that you hired them, right? Um, Local crime is down, I'm assuming, over the past few years, I think.
Yeah, we have seen considerable crime decreases over the last 3 years across the entire city, and I think that a good portion of that has to do with the fact that our officers are out there, that they're proactive, they're addressing issues. Uh, a lot of agencies across the country, though, we've seen crime trend down over the last several years,
Yeah.
thankfully.
Yeah.
Um, but I would like to think that it's a result of the intentionality that we put forth into really addressing the crime concerns and looking at that. We have an intelligence-led style of policing. We just don't shotgun things. We take a look at where things happening, how is it
Right.
trending. We focus our resources smartly. We focus on repeat offenders. We use intelligence to drive a lot of our decisions. We have a very robust investigative unit that follows up and has an extremely high clearance rate that's beyond the national average. And so that goes back to the importance of selecting the right people too. When you have the right people, you can do a lot more with the right people than you can with more people at times. So it's really important to make sure that you truly have professionals that are committed to their craft.
Sure. And talking about enhancement and learning and wanting to be able to put your hands onto other programs and stuff, technology drives things too, right? Force
Right.
multiplier is a big phrase that's being used in this space. How are you using technology or systems? How are they integrated into the police department? What are you doing as far as like drones or crime center in the cloud and stuff like that?
Yeah, so we have a number of different things that we're in the process of implementing currently. One of the things, and this is actually happening in Cobb County as well, is that there's a multi-jurisdictional real-time crime center in Henry County. The Henry County Police Department and local agencies collaborate together regularly, and so their real-time crime center is able to support us in those initiatives, those endeavors. But we also are in the process of implementing our own crime center so that we have a common operating platform. We're able to pull in all of our automated license plate readers cameras, all of our cameras across the city. We're in the process of implementing a camera network in some of our problem areas in the community that we can monitor those things. We're in the process of implementing a drone as first responder program. And we've been able to do that by virtue of grant funding.
Right.
So a limitation in implementing that technology, there's obviously a tremendous cost in the startup of an agency. However, if you want to police smarter and you want to utilize those technologies, there's costs associated with that too. So these things can get very expensive, and
Mhm.
we always have to be looking at either how can we leverage partnerships, how can we share costs to implement this technology, or are there alternate funding sources that we can use in order to acquire this so that we're able to enhance public safety in the community? Thankfully, we've been able to secure funding for the Real-Time Crime Center, for our LPR cameras, for our uh, network of AI cameras that we'll be implementing throughout the community. And one of the challenges, though, is being a new agency. Again, we're only 3 years going into July.
Mhm.
Is there's a lot that's still in process. You know, we're still evolving, we're still growing, we're still building systems. And when you're doing that and simultaneously trying to implement a lot of different projects and initiatives, it can be very challenging. And so what we found is we have to be a little more strategic in what we do,
Mhm.
and we've had to slow down a bit in some of our ambitions so that we can get our feet underneath us. Because I'm
Right.
one of those folks that I've got all sorts of ideas, and I need my team to tell me, okay, well, can we get one thing done before we can implement this?
Right.
But definitely to get back to your question, leveraging technology is a force multiplier. It cuts down, or has the potential rather, to cut down on officer response time and certainly enhance your investigative capacities as well.
Yeah, it's interesting speaking to Chief Restrepo here in the city of Peachtree Corners when I've had some time with them, and we talked a bit about the technology they're using, the 200 plus cameras in the city, the integrating of commercial cameras and ring cameras in people's homes, as at least as registered database, right? For some of these. Some of these are live, like commercial cameras and stuff. Does give them from the palm of their hand, essentially, the ability to check on areas that may sound like problems going on, but may not be. Group of people turn into just, some people hanging out by their car. Um, so it does, technology can do a lot. I feel like sometimes it can be like a kid in a candy store. It's like, wow, I'd like that. I think we could use that there, or the bowler wrap, or this and that. Yeah. So I can see how a police officer can look at that and say, well, that'll make our job safer and maybe safer for the people around, what's happening.
Mhm.
So I can appreciate all that. The feedback that you get from the field also, I'm sure is important, from the officers in the field. So how do you wrap your mind, you know, as far as that goes? Um, how do you foresee the police force being over the next 5 years? I know you're new, 3 years in, hardly 3 years in, but where do you see, what's the game plan? You must have some sort of game plan or vision for the next 5 years of what you want to be, where you want to be, as far as policing, community, and all that.
Absolutely. We want to be a model agency of our size and really be the gold standard for agencies across the country. And so that's sort of our ambitious goal. And one of the things, and of course, vision's always aspirational. If you
Yeah.
can achieve your vision next year, 3 years down the road, it's probably too small. And we really want to be the premier agency of our size across the country. We want other agencies to come to Stockbridge to see how we're doing things, from how we're utilizing technology to how we're building, robust programs that truly engage our community.
Mhm.
And that's a process, and you have to, again, be strategic in how we're moving forward. We have a lot of wonderful people, and that's why we're able to do the things that we do, but we're still a relatively small agency. We don't have the staffing that we need, really based upon calls for service. And thankfully, we have the right people. But as the city grows, so does the department need to grow as well. When we
Yeah.
started, we projected, and because of just the uncertainty with what's this actually going to cost, I'm sure you can understand that in many respects, they said, when I say they, the elected officials and decision makers, well, let's not go too big to start off with, and we'll
Yeah.
scale up from there. But the problem is that we're forever needing to scale up. The community is growing. We started in 2022 in July. In 2023 in January, the city had a referendum, and there was a large annexation that brought in about 7,000 new residents in the city. So it took us from 29 to 36,000, and we had to provide service for those additional residents with the same number of staff that we had. And
Right.
we continue to grow and to develop. And so you have to grow with the agency. And so smart strategic growth obviously is part of that plan. But we want to fully implement a lot of the technology programs. We have a very robust, and one of the things I'm most proud about is our community initiatives. We have very strong partnerships with the community. One of the things that I started here was a police advisory council, which is composed of a broad cross segment of members of the community. We have a representative from the business community, from our faith-based community, a youth representative, representatives from every council district, from every patrol zone that meet with me. As a matter of fact, we were in here meeting late yesterday evening, and they're able to work in partnership with me, and I'm able to hear from them about what are the concerns, what are you hearing from your area, in introducing things to them. Like, as an example, is we're rewriting our policies and we're exploring things like our pursuit policy, being able to sit down with them and say, what do you think we as a department should be pursuing for? What would you support? And really just involving in that process, because if we get in a vehicle pursuit and we're an agency that's pursuing somebody for a misdemeanor violation because that's in our policy and we don't have the support of the community if something goes wrong there, that
Yeah.
causes us to potentially lose trust. And so having that network of
Yeah.
trusted advisors to work with us has been huge. But just to continue to evolve the department, to grow it in scope, to enhance our technologies, to continue to build upon what we've already established is really what we're going towards. We're still working on refining our processes and procedures, and it'll probably be another couple of years. We had the ambitious goal of many people don't realize that in law enforcement that certification accreditation is a voluntary standard, that there's not a requirement that agencies have to adhere to best practice standards.
Yeah.
And within 2 years, we achieved state certification. Of the 900 and some agencies across the state, there are less than 170 that are state certified. So we made that a goal of ours because we wanted to let the community know that we're committed to best practices. We're now working towards national accreditation. And these are ambitious goals for an agency that's still evolving and still growing and not quite 3 years old. But if we truly want to be the model, then that's what we're always aspiring to achieve. Officer wellness, well-being, leadership development, those are all things that are huge priorities for us moving forward also.
Yeah. I see that. I mean, the thread that runs through all of it, right, is well-being, not only for your officers, but for the community itself, right? We're all family in the end, right? I mean, they're not individuals out there. Everyone's part of a family of some sort, right? So whether you're a police family or you're a family of five, a family of two, or one with the family around them, yeah, protection is it's a challenging role to, and I don't envy you all. Um, so we're towards the end of our time together, Chief Trammer, but I wanted to ask if there's any specific advice that you would want to offer other communities that are looking to establish their own police departments. What advice would you give them, having gone through the process already several times, it seems?
Yeah, I think the first aspect is really defining your why before you define your what. And I think we really have to ask ourselves, why are we doing this? What is it that we want as a community? And then you have to, assess what is this going to cost us, and is it worth the investment? Um, I think that we have to contend with the fact that public safety is expensive in most all governments. It's probably, if not the most, one of the top expenses for city government. And it's an investment. At least I hope it's an investment. And that's what we want it to be for our city is we want the community to actually derive value off of what we do and the services that we provide. And I do think that it's a worthwhile endeavor launching a new department. It is hard. But when it's done right, I believe that it stands to the potential to change the directory or the trajectory rather of a city and the lives of those who live, work, and play in that community. It's been, a great experience, and we're continuing to grow and to evolve. But just with the positive feedback that we've seen from our community, the level of support and engagement that we have, it's encouraging every time that we're in a public forum or a meeting with our community members just to see the level of appreciation and support and partnership in what we do. And we've been able to do some great things across our community by virtue of that.
Glad to hear it. It's success, right? Success is in everything that we do is a good thing. Um, I want to thank you, Chief Frank Trammer, for being with us. Hang in there for a second as I close out our podcast. Everyone, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions for Chief Trammer, certainly we'll have some notes in the contact information in our show notes, so you can email their department and such. If you have comments, of course, leave them in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or listening on Facebook, or if you're listening to this as an audio podcast, we appreciate the review that you would give this podcast on Apple and Google Play and all the others. It'll be easier for other people to find this as well. So, and thank you again to our sponsors, Vox Populi and EV Remodeling Inc. Appreciate their support for supporting these podcasts and the magazines and all that. Frank, if I may, Frank, thank you. I appreciate you being with us.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Rico. Appreciate the invitation.
Sure. Thanks, everyone.